finding random frames in Sinners until it's ugly. I think this is a very pretty movie, but I do think it is a little bit inconsistent, as you might see during this video. 1, 2, 3. Gorgeous shot. If you haven't seen Sinners, first of all, what are you doing? Go watch it. There are probably going to be spoilers in this video, but if you don't know, this movie takes place in the 1930s, and this scene in particular takes place in a barn of sorts, an old building. And since we are shooting in a dark barn at night, the motivation for the light is primarily coming from these practical bulbs that are strung all through the interior of this barn. But bulbs like this do not provide that much light, and so in order to properly expose people's faces, they had to use other lights to augment the lights coming from the bulb. And the way they did this was by using 19 through 30-inch gem balls, double diffused with unbleached muslin, which were hung throughout the set, controlled with Variac dimmers. So for this shot, they basically just have a giant ball of diffused light right off of frame, and it is just providing this light on her face. Also, take note of the aspect ratio of this shot. We will talk about that a little bit later. So, not an ugly shot. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's talk about the aspect ratio right now. When you are watching the movie, you will notice several things different about this shot from the previous one. First of all, like I said, the aspect ratio is different. Technically, what we see here is a 16:9 aspect ratio, because this is what your screen size for your TV most likely is if you are watching this on HBO Max. However, they originally filmed the shot in a 1.43:1 aspect ratio, which is basically just a taller aspect ratio than what you will see on your TV. So if you saw this in an IMAX theater, you would see more image on the top and the bottom. And that's because they shot 20% of this movie on IMAX cameras with 15 perf 65mm film. The other 80% of this movie, as you can see in something like this shot, is filmed at a 2.76:1 aspect ratio. And that is one of the widest, if not the widest, aspect ratio you are going to see in a theatrically released movie. And that's because they shot these portions of the film on the Ultra Panavision 70 system, which is a little bit confusing because Ultra Panavision 70 is a system. It is a system that includes a Panavision 65mm film camera, a 65mm film stock, and Ultra Panatar lenses. All three of those things combine to create this Ultra Panavision 70 system, which is a system intended to take that 65mm film that I just mentioned, which the film is originally shot on, and then print that film onto 70mm film, which is where the 70 comes from in the system name, and that is what you see projected at the theater. And one of the things that makes this Ultra Panavision 70 system unique is the widescreen aspect ratio that I just mentioned. It is wider than most movies because they are using specific lenses, the Ultra Panatar lenses, and those lenses are anamorphic, and the anamorphic look is a lot more wide. But it gets even more confusing when you realize that both of these shots that were shot on the IMAX camera and the one I just showed you are both shot on 65mm film, except for these shots were shot in 15 perf 65mm film. So you would have 15 perforations on the side of the image right here. I don't know if I'm counting these right or not, but it would look something like that. Whereas this image is only a 5 perf 65mm film, so it only has 5 perforations on the side. And the perforation is just basically the hole in the film stock. And typically the more perfs you have, the bigger the image and more resolution you're going to get in that image. I know I did not do a good job explaining that, but if you want a better explanation of the film stocks they used, go watch this video right here. But yes, this is a nice image. Let's move on. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I love this shot. One tip I have for indie filmmakers is that if you want a shot to look pretty and you don't have much of a budget for set design and all that, all you have to do is take your actor outside, put them in front of leaves with the sun shining and creating these little light pockets on the leaves, and then blur out the background and use a long lens. Make sure that the subject is separated from the background and the background is really blurry, because when you blur the background like this, it just creates nice little pockets of light, nice bokeh in the light coming through the trees. And then also just make sure your subject is lit properly. As you can see here, they are bouncing light or just blasting light onto his face right here. 1, 2, 3. Okay, this is a cool shot. One thing I noticed about this shot, and something you will see in the rest of the movie, is that this shot looks pretty dark to me, and that is because the DP, Autumn Duralt Arkapaw, typically exposed her subjects 2 stops under, which basically just means that she underexposed the image a little bit on purpose in order to maintain a nice black level and contrast within the image. Also, here's a BTS picture of the setup they used to film the shots in this car. As you can see, they actually have a 2-camera setup, one facing this direction and one facing this direction, and they are lighting with a flag overhead, and that's partly why the image looks dark, because they are blocking the sunlight from hitting his face, and they are also filling in the face with this LED light. So even though the contraption they are using is not simple, the lighting theory they are using is simple. Block the light you don't want, block the hard light from the sun, and then fill in with the softer light from the LED. So not ugly, here we go, 1, 2, 3. I really like this shot. Here we can see that the light lighting Hailee Steinfeld is motivated by the moon because this is outside at nighttime, but we can also see that the light on top of this car is also motivated by the moon. And what is interesting is that the light on the car and the light on her are different colors. And we can see how they lit something like this with a BTS photo right here that I found at American Cinematographer magazine, where I believe these might be sky panels just arranged in a box-like pattern and then blasted through a piece of diffusion. As we can see even in this box right here, half of the LED lights are turned more to an orange hue to mimic the light coming from the building right here, just to blast directly onto the people close to the building, and then half of it is meant to hit the ones further away from the building, mimicking the moonlight. And so for our image of Hailee Steinfeld here, we can see that they probably tuned the LED lights above the truck thing to more of a blue moonlight hue, and then they wanted her skin tones to be neutral and look better and not bluish on camera. And so these lights above her are probably tuned more to something like 5600 Kelvin, while this is even higher. We can also see that they are lighting a little bit of the background right here just to give some texture and contrast, and this is just being done with probably a separate light on the ground behind this truck. It's not ugly, here we go, 1, 2, 3. Love this shot. The shaping of the light on her face is just very nice. You have a highlight emphasizing the structure of her face over here, a highlight separating her from the background right here, and just a very soft light filling the rest, and you have a nice contrast ratio of shadow side of her face to light side of her face. Now this scene happens in the grocery store, and according to American Cinematographer, the way they lit this scene was by overhead soft boxes containing light gear light tile LEDs shooting through full grid diffusion. So basically they just had a ton of LED lights above her. As you can kind of see in the reflection of her forehead right here, you can kind of see some definition in the shape of the lights, which is not bad, but you can kind of see it. So not ugly, 1, 2, 3. Okay, another great shot. So again, we probably have the soft LED ball off screen right here providing the key light on her face. But another thing they did in this scene just to provide a general ambiance, maybe the light you can see on this person back here, is that they were bouncing airy T12 Fresnels off unbleached muslin on the ceiling. So somewhere in the set they had airy Fresnels just shooting up into diffusion that was hung on the ceiling, and that just created a general ambient light. These lights were also gelled with 1/2 CTO, which just made the lights a little bit more orange. Not ugly, here we go, 1, 2, 3. Okay, this scene was amazing. I loved this scene, or this shot. And it's amazing because this entire 3-minute sequence looks like it is one take, but it's actually several takes put together because IMAX cameras are notoriously famous for not being able to record that long. So every 75 seconds of this 3 minutes and 20-second take, they actually had to reset, change the film mag, and keep going. And so what you are seeing here is actually about 5 different shots stitched together in post. So a genius shot, and my favorite part of the movie by far, 1, 2, 3. Okay, this is a cool shot too. I believe this scene was actually shot in 40 frames per second, and that just means that when played back in 24 frames per second, it will look a little bit slower. I believe some of the scene was also filmed with the IMAX camera mounted on a Movie Bird MB50XL crane. Other than that, we're clearly backlighting with the sun right here, and then also maybe fogging or dusting up the place a little bit so that the sunlight is shining through this dust or smoke from the gun, I'm not sure what. And also getting a little bit of a lens flare here, but that doesn't look bad to me. So yeah, it's cool. Not ugly, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it's a cool shot. And the first thing I want you to notice is just the color design in the costumes. This was clearly a choice made to distinguish between the two brothers, Smoke and Stack, because if we didn't have a clear distinguishing look to each of them, then we would be confused as to which one was which. But throughout the movie, Smoke wears blue and Stack wears red. It's kind of a basic choice, but it works in this situation, and it helps the audience distinguish between the two characters. Now, as far as how they shot Michael B. Jordan in 2 spots at one time in the same shot, there is a great featurette on YouTube that I will show on screen right now that you can go watch. But basically what they did for some shots is they had a 25-foot techno dolly which enabled repeatable moves for dual shots of Jordan, which were composited in post. They also used a Halo Rig 12 camera circular body rig which captured 360-degree head performance reference data from Michael B. Jordan, and that footage was used to help seamlessly replace the head of a carefully matched body double with his performance. So basically it's just smart people doing smart stuff. And I think it looks really good. This is a great example of a movie that does twinning right. Not ugly, 1, 2, 3. Okay, this is a cool shot too. Okay, I'd like to finally take the time to talk about some of the inconsistencies with the cinematography of this movie that I noticed while watching it. The first inconsistency is the changing of the aspect ratios, and it is an inconsistency. That's not to say it's bad. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing to do, but it is an inconsistency that can be noticed by the viewers if you do it in the wrong kind of way. For instance, there's one part in this movie where there's a widescreen shot, and then the next shot is an IMAX, just image of the sun, and then the next shot is a widescreen image again. And when you do something like that, I think it makes it more obvious when you only have one shot that is the taller aspect ratio sandwiched by two widescreen aspect ratios. And I think it just doesn't come across as meaningful. And I think that's what I want when someone does the changing of aspect ratios, is I want it to be meaningful. And luckily in this movie, we have several examples where it is a meaningful transition. Specifically in that shot I previously talked about, that IMAX tracking shot that lasted 3 minutes of all of the people singing and dancing. And I think it works primarily because this specific shot in this specific part of the scene is like a grandiose thing that is happening. It is an escalation. It is basically the climax of the scene, and so you want more energy pumped into that. But also, he does something in this scene that makes it more of a transition rather than an abrupt cut. He actually shows the aspect ratio slowly getting bigger. And I personally like this way of doing it instead of just cutting to the bigger aspect ratio, because it is more gradual and it makes it feel like the transition has meaning to it. But the other inconsistency is not just the aspect ratio changing, it's the way that they achieve the aspect ratio change, if that makes any sense. Because the way they are achieving the aspect ratio change in most of these shots is by shooting on different film stocks. So like I said, this image is shot on a 65mm 5% film stock, and the taller aspect ratios are filmed with a 15% 65mm film stock, which is IMAX. And not only do those change the aspect ratio, but they change the quality of the image. I first noticed this in Oppenheimer, and oddly enough, that is where Ryan Coogler got the inspiration to shoot IMAX from, was Oppenheimer, because he loved how clean and clear the IMAX image looked. But when you compare the IMAX image with the widescreen image shot on the Ultra Panavision 70 system, the IMAX image just looks better. I can kind of show you that here with an image of Michael B. Jordan on the 5% 65mm film versus the IMAX. Here's an IMAX image of Michael B. Jordan. Look how clean and soft and sharp and colorful this image looks compared to this one. This one looks more like something you would see in the 1930s. It looks more Kodachrome, contrasty dark, doesn't have as much dynamic range or color range as compared to this one. I know the lighting and everything's not the same, but I think you can see what I'm saying. And I actually have a better example of this, because there is actually a shot in this movie that they shot on both types of film stock. This one was shot on the IMAX, and a very similar shot right here was shot on the 65 5%. And if I click back and forth between these two, you will notice some differences. First, pay attention to the color of the grass. Notice how the color of the green changes. The greens in the widescreen format get a lot more desaturated. There's not as much color there. There's not as much pop. Second of all, notice the highlights, as you can see down here. It's less noticeable, but the highlights in this image are a little bit more harsh than the highlights in this image. There's more dynamic range in the IMAX footage. And then finally, if I just zoom in as far as I can, notice how the edges of the image are more jagged in the widescreen compared to the IMAX. This image is just a lot more smooth. The fall off of the focus and the edges of these objects are smoother than right here. And that is because you are getting more resolution in the IMAX image. I've also noticed that the color of this movie tends to be a little bit inconsistent, even with like what seems to be the same shot. So right here, just take a look at this guy's jacket, this yellow jacket, and I'm gonna go a little bit further into the film. Same shot basically, but look at the color. The color is a lot different. That is not the same shade of yellow. Look how much more contrast and saturation is in that image compared to this one. And I'm guessing that just has something to do with the way that the film is processed. I don't think it's necessarily anything they did on set that day, but when you're shooting with film, it can be a little bit inconsistent. There are also some shots in this film that I'm not going to be able to show you on YouTube because the compression's so bad, but if you watch this on an OLED TV in 4K, you will see some shots look like they have a lot more film grain in them than the previous or subsequent shots, and that creates another bit of that inconsistency. But that's not to say that this film is ugly, and that's not to say that the DP did a bad job. I mean, for heaven's sake, I just watched The Godfather, and The Godfather struggles from similar things, you know? So this, I think, just when you shoot on film like this, maybe even especially the Ultra Panavision 70 system, you are going to get a little bit of inconsistencies, and it's very difficult even for professionals to be completely consistent between shots. But none of these shots are ugly. These are great shots. I love this shot personally. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, great shot. Same kind of thing we've seen before. 1, 2, 3. This scene was excellent in my opinion. I just want to scroll through a little bit. This guy was amazing. This scene particularly was very good looking, mainly due to the effects, I think, on this guy. This just looks really great. Not ugly. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, cool thing. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, looks pretty good. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, a lot of the same similar lighting style because we're shooting in the same place. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that's cool. They're out of focus, but they're supposed to be because this is the focus of the shot. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I think this is an example of it just being a little too underexposed. Let me see, is this the scene? Yeah, this is the scene where he dies. And we're supposed to be seeing his reaction to him dying, but we can't really see his reaction because it's so underexposed. And that's mainly because the light just seems to be coming from directly behind him with no light on his face, and also due to the fact that the DP chose to light 2 stops under. So she intentionally underexposed things, which works for a lot of images, but I don't think it necessarily works for this one. I want to see his reaction to the guy on the floor dying. But overall, I really like the look of this film. I think the only knock you can really have on it is that it is inconsistent in certain areas. And that inconsistency is not even going to be noticeable if you are not watching this on a very sharp TV. So, I mean, just enjoy it. It's a nice looking film. It's cool. I like the approach that they had, and I think this is a great movie, definitely worth the watch. I do think this movie works better as an allegory. If you want my quick movie review, I think it works better as an allegory rather than a like straightforward plot driven movie. I don't think the plot is super great, but the allegory and the metaphors being conveyed with the cinematography and with the themes and with the characters, I think are very worthwhile and get you thinking about your own existence and your own place in society. And I think that's great. So please like and subscribe if you want more of this. Goodbye.